This is Ben Woodford here on 90.1 KZSU Stanford. We are back with another hour of modern education right here on the airwaves and streaming online. I'm very excited to have a special guest co-host in the studio today, Emily. Emily is going to come on the mic now and say hello, and she'll be talking with you through the hour. Say hi, Emily.
Hello. How's everyone?
All right.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing so good. Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's been a crazy, amazing, productive, and fun day, and getting you in the studio today is an extra...
Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's an extra added layer of excitement, and, you know, we love getting new talent on the air here at KZSU. If you're interested in being part of the KZSU family, we would love to hear from you and love to get you in on some of the new trainings coming up. And you can always contact us and go to the website to find out more. What do you think, Emily? Were we ready to do a little education talk today?
I think we're ready to educate some people.
Yeah, I think we are too. So, first, let's just kind of set the stage here. Today we're going to have a little bit of music and we're going to chat. And what's your education level? What's your experience with education? You got any cool education stories you can share with us?
Experience in education. Well, I guess you can say I recently graduated from university in London and just landed back into the US. So I'm trying to assimilate back to American culture. And...
oh my gosh, that must be quite a transition for you.
Oh, it is, especially when you're comparing American like university culture, education culture to British.
Yeah, so can you give me like one of the things that stands out to you?
One of the things I would definitely say would have to be the teaching methods.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have too much background to compare for American, but within British, it seems like it's a lot more assessment based than exam based.
Oh, okay.
So assessments, when I say that, is like, what can you put out rather than exams being constantly on your back.
So when you say what can you put out, are you talking like a product or an actual deliverable?
It could be, yeah, so it depends on what you're doing. So it could be, like you said, a product, or even for writing. So it'd be a lot more writing based, and analysis on just who you are.
So they're having you, it seems to you at least that maybe there's less of the just testing for the sake of ranking people.
Yes.
And more about getting you into what you're actually doing. What degree did you get?
So I got a degree in journalism and media, and did a minor in philosophy. So I was really nice to complement the journalism with some analysis.
Yeah.
Which seems, so I went to an American university as well, but it was an American university with a British spin. So even then it wasn't even really British. So
it was an American university in Britain?
Yeah. Exactly.
That seems like a strange thing to say, but I'm just going to let you explain it.
Oh man, I mean, I think I could first start off with the title. It goes, Richmond, the International American University in London. So that's like a long mouthful that you have to say. So typically you just go Richmond University in London.
Right. That's a lot more convenient, right?
No, you definitely have, because of its international presence, you have professors from all over bringing in their own understanding of education and how to communicate that to the students. So you just have such a big mashup of different ideas.
Right. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And I'm really interested about your experience in the philosophy side, because my degree's in pure mathematics, which to me is the symbolic logic of philosophy.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, not all cases, obviously, but so I'm curious about the you mentioned this analysis and how you got this heavy analysis piece within your journalism training. Is there a highlight of that you could share with the audience?
I'd say overall, philosophy is a study that tries to understand how people work. And that is essentially exactly what journalism is doing. It's kind of like a social study.
Yeah.
So philosophy is built up over many, many years and centuries. So we have like basically this historical reference of how people are. Yeah. And or not necessarily how people are, but how people theorize people to be. So it almost brings this nice framework to work with in journalism for what makes things right or wrong. Is this really right or is this really wrong? So it's really a nice way to play off of ideas back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure when you're trying to put together stories and you're thinking about your journalistic endeavors, you're probably also trying to think about the kind of philosophical underpinnings of why you're doing that.
Even if you haven't studied philosophy as a journalist, you probably are diving into this side without even realizing.
Right. So it becomes something that almost just helps guide what you would have been doing anyway, which is grappling with the underpinnings of what you're sharing, because there is a responsibility there, right? Yeah. If you give a story that is not factual or is misleading or even indicates a certain way of thinking that is maybe even true but not intended, you have to be aware of that as you're crafting your stories, right?
Yeah. No, and it's not the easiest to be able to define when you are putting in, like we were saying earlier, our implicit bias. What is the things that we are the things that we are kind of day to day just assuming and categorizing, and how am I going to present that in an article where it is supposed to be not opinion based.
Right. And that's such a hard thing to do deliberately, because everything we ever write is somehow attached to our own experience or opinion or previous understandings.
Exactly. This is one of my things. When I first got into journalism, I was like a bit postmodern. I was like, nothing, like there's no way you can really go to the truth. And one of my professors kept challenging that. And basically it goes down to we like to try to understand the truth. So what is the best way, kind of like an underlying holistic truth that most people agree off of? Yeah. And then it goes into, well, everything's constructed and blah, blah, blah. Right. And it just goes into nowhere. So it's also too, it's like when I have this philosophy background, it almost gives me no answer.
I've been there so many times. I've just recently been introduced to this a paradigm in research called contextualism, which is basically the idea that all truth, all understanding that we ever derive is always embedded within the context of where it was understood. And so it helps put a framing around, like, can we have truth? Well, yeah, but only this truth within this context, in this time frame. And maybe we can take parts of that and extend it to other places.
Well, that's exactly it. Because the truth is only temporary for whatever evidence you backed it up with. And we're seeing that as a big problem right now in journalism.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure with the fake news spree everywhere you look, if you don't like the news, you just call it fake and move on. And
anyone can be a journalist at this point, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they let me be a journalist, so I guess that's actually true, literally. I'm reminded of Stephen Colbert, the political satirist, now late night talk show host, right? He used to say, he said once on one of his shows, I really hate books because they're all facts and no heart.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I can't remember who said it, but there was this also saying, she said that newspapers are the first draft of history.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So it also is basically to say, well, we might not have gotten it right. It's an easy cop out, but might not have gotten it right, but it was the first draft. So
yeah, and you're leaving breadcrumbs for the historians to pick up later. So
and that's what it's most used for.
Yeah, absolutely. Archive, and historians love you for that, because they need scraps of evidence to be able to move forward with some kind of high-minded conclusion on the distant and recent past.
Exactly. So, and it constantly changes.
Absolutely. This is so much fun. We're going to go to a song real quick, and we're going to come right back here with more chat and talk. And I have Emily here in the studio, guest co-hosting. And this is Ben Woodford with 90.1 KZSU Stanford in Modern Education.
This portion of the radio show was deleted due to copyright reasons, but you can tune in to KZSU 90.1 every Friday from 3 to 4.
Well, that was a fun mix of some old school songs that you may have recognized, but probably didn't recognize the mix, because it was a little bit of putting it all together. And I am back here on the air. This is your host, Benjamin S. Woodford with Modern Education. And I've got Emily here in the studio, and we're going to jump into our next little segment. And then when we're done, we'll have some more music going for you. So, Emily, I know you're sort of back in the country, right? You were gone and now you're back, and you've been trying to really immerse yourself in this Silicon Valley lifestyle while you're here.
Oh, yes.
And
trying.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost unavoidable because Silicon Valley's everywhere you turn, right? Yeah. And so I know you were telling me earlier before the show started that you've gone to some talks recently on campus. Can you just maybe give us a tiny little snippet of one of the talks that you've seen recently?
Yeah, so I went to I've never really dove into the field of tech and being in the area. I really wanted to just take on one conference where I can at least maybe try to understand.
Yeah, I think this is a great place to do that.
Yeah. So I went to, it was basically like, it was neurology with AI. And so how are the cognitive understandings of how we learn, how can we apply those to AI? And they were talking about this all the way from Google Translate to self-driving cars. So it was a really nice topic, but someone who has never been in computer science, it was wow.
So are you telling me that you went to this talk for curiosity's sake?
Just pure curiosity,
and
of
you
course,
weren't an expert when you walked in the door beforehand?
Yeah, but I felt like when I walked into this room, I felt like I was in a room full of geniuses.
Yeah, it always feels like that around here.
It felt almost like magical.
Yeah. We want it to rub off on us a little, right?
I'm just going to sit
accidentally
here.
Bumping into everybody, see if you can catch a little bit of it.
Exactly. I think I caught some extra some IQ points.
Yeah. You know, I remember one time reading about somebody asking Stephen Hawking what his IQ was. And he said, if I was worried about that, I probably wouldn't be as smart as you think I am. Or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this idea, like, it's really easy to interpret someone else as being a genius because they've done great things or accomplished things. But I think if almost every genius you sit down and ask them, they're going to be like, I'm just a guy or a girl or a person. Like I just did something really cool and everyone thinks I'm a genius, and that's great. But I find, most people are pretty humble in their own capacity. But
I'd say at this point in time, we're at a point where we find all these science majors or people in the field of computer science, like I said, like magicians.
Yeah.
Because it's such a complicated language it's like, it just happens.
Yeah.
Therefore, it must be magic.
Right. That reminds me of a comedy bit. I think it was Joe Rogan, who I love, by the way. He's nasty, and you probably shouldn't love him. But I am not recommending anyone listen to him. But if you did, I think he did a bit where he said, okay, something to the effect of, if I take you and put you on a desert island, how long is it going to be till you make an iPhone? And, for most of us, the answer is never. And even the people who work on the teams that build iPhones, they probably couldn't do it either, because there's little tiny pieces that they may have built, but the entire thing is it's unattainable for anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example to really speak to the idea of specialization.
Specialization, definitely.
Because the reality is all this technology is foreign to almost everybody, including people in tech.
And that goes into specialization, the collective mind.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going into, when you specialize in these fields, to not only just be in that field, which is what this conference was a lot about, about sharing your specialty to different fields, so then we can build.
Oh, yeah. Cross-pollination is such a powerful part of it. I mean, I study education, but I try to take methods from all the other, actually, I specifically really lean towards the medical field and the advertising and marketing field. And I keep going back to those because in my mind, those are the best funded research areas. And so even though they maybe not be developing their methods for education.
Can you talk about more within advertising? For research.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about and trying to figure out how to incorporate into my research, which is in math education, is how do you get people to like math? Which is, it's like selling snow to Eskimos on a winter day, and it's not easy.
No.
But when you think about it, how do we get people to do things that change their actual behaviors? we generally advertise and give them commercials and inundate them with media until it becomes familiar. And then once it's familiar, we're more likely to click on it again or seek it out.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a really powerful analogy and a very fertile land of opportunity as far as research goes, because this is something that's been done in other fields for, years, maybe even 100 years or more than that. And why wouldn't we be utilizing that, high level, well-funded research approach in something like education, which is sadly generally not as well funded and doesn't have the sort of technology backing it to be really doing some things as maybe at least on a broad enough scale. I don't ever want to talk badly about education researchers because they are amazing. And I think it's probably like I'm the luckiest person alive to be working with such amazing colleagues. But at the same time, we can steal methods from other people. That's part of the scientific process, right? Just like you were saying.
Yeah. So how do you get people to like math?
Well, I think I've done that at least for a few hundred people in my math classrooms and in my teaching and tutoring. But, on a broader scale, to me, I can't really grasp why people don't like math, except for the way it's been taught horribly. And
it's definitely a factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And my advisor here on campus is working diligently every day to work on the teaching side of it. My advisor is Joe Bowler, and she works on growth mindset and bringing in a lot of these science-based methods into the classroom and helping teachers learn how to use the cutting-edge science in meaningful ways. And she's really doing a lot of great work in bridging the gap between those two things. I'm looking at more of the cultural barriers to liking math, because the reality is when you're in a classroom and you've just come from outside and everyone outside says, oh, that's boring, I don't like it, it's useless anyway, it's really hard to just walk into the classroom and let all that go. And as you mentioned earlier about this.
Probably that too. Yeah. It's what's my use to this?
Yeah. Yeah.
How am I going to use this?
That's right. Yeah. And the sad part is a lot of people don't ever use it and they never get to the point where
That's because we're using our calculators.
No, I don't think calculators are stopping us from using math. I think it's in a lot of cases, it's a general discomfort with our own ability or understanding of math. And I think the more people understand their own ability and their own usefulness of where math can help them, the more opportunities they would find to use it in their daily lives.
I'm thinking about myself, and for math, it's so daunting.
Tell me about it.
Oh, man. Well, just to start off, I haven't taken a math class in 4 years.
Okay.
I tested out of it, so I didn't have to.
You dodged that bullet, right?
Exactly. But now, no, I say the calculator thing, because now I'm completely reliant on my calculator rather than figuring out just automatically in my mind.
Yeah.
Or I always have, I'll be literally using my fingers trying to
which is not a bad thing, actually.
But it feels like it, because you see people, it's like, basically, if it's once again like a language, if you don't understand, you feel intimidated almost.
Absolutely.
And these numbers, they're supposed to mean something. They're supposed to get me to some solution.
Yeah.
But it's such a step-by-step process that, it seems very daunting.
Yeah, it really is. I have a funny story that kind of relates to this. In my work right now, I've been studying something called an implicit association test, which is a way of testing people's implicit bias. And some of the researchers that I've been reading about, they sort of stumbled upon a mathematical implicit bias that they didn't expect.
Oh, what's that?
So check this out. They wanted to just norm their tool to make sure that it was reading a neutral reading on something that was supposed to be neutral.
Okay.
So they gave people a bias test about just giving them random strings of letters and random strings of numbers. And they thought there would be no difference between these two groups because they're just abstract symbols and random strings, so there's no meaning to them. But what they found is that when people saw the random strings of numbers, they had a harder time processing it because they had implicit bias against numbers.
I get it.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
I would be that person in that test room.
I think it'd be a lot of people, actually. I mean,
well, it goes back to education.
Yeah.
How we teach it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like people have such anxiety.
Yeah.
And such bad experiences, and rightly so, because most math is taught horribly.
And when you fall behind, there's no way to go back.
Yeah, and it's taught in a way where it's always building on itself and
exactly.
assuming you already know the last thing to do the next thing, which I don't think is always true or necessary. I think a lot of times, I mean, even in my own experience as a math student, I felt like I always found how to do the last thing when I needed it for the next thing. It wasn't like I already knew it. It was like, oh, I got to figure out trigonometry now because I got to do calculus. And without trigonometry, calculus is going to be impossible. So I went back and learned the trigonometry through the process of needing it. And to me, I think that's everything that we ever learn is that way. We have to learn it in context of some useful mechanism, like you right now sitting here in the radio, learning how to do radio. Yeah. I mean, it's more fun for one. And if I sent you a video of me sitting here talking by myself, you wouldn't get nearly as much out of it.
Well, it's all about immersive learning.
Exactly.
Getting yourself in the seat, doing it.
Yeah. And that's how it should be with mathematics too. And sadly, it's generally not that way. But we started this talking about artificial intelligence and brain science. And I have a little story about that too. So I'm going to redirect us back here. And we've already been on for half an hour. Can you believe that?
No. Wow. Time goes by quickly.
Flies on the radio. I hope it flies for you out there in radio land too. We always want to bring some value to our listeners and hopefully have some interesting conversations. So if you have any thoughts, you can always text us at 855-723-9010. We have a nice shiny monitor in here that we can see all your texts right up there. So if you have any thoughts or questions or comments or stories that you'd like to share,
yes, please share.
I'll probably share them on the air. So just text them in.
Good to hear what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Just text us at 855-723-9010. And I am going to jump back to this neuroscience computer topic for a minute. Over the summer, I read a book by Stanislaus Dehaene, which is one of the leading neuroscience researchers. And he was talking about how they have actually built a simulated neural network using the theoretical understandings that he had put together, and him and his team and his researchers and grad students and everything from, years and years of bodies of work of trying to understand how the brain works through brain scans. And using the high level theory, specifically the theory of the global neuronal workspace, which basically says that the front of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, our kind of rational thinking, the one you used a lot in your philosophy, that can only really handle one thing at a time. And so when we bring something into consciousness, we sit with it in our prefrontal cortex and we really get to logically dissect and be very aware of what's going on. Now, behind all of that, there is processing going on at a level that is prevalent and constant. And in every other area of our brain is constantly trying to make sense of the world. Yeah. So if you think of your body as like a big sensor, everything you touch, everything you see, everything you hear, everything you smell is just bringing in raw data. And then that raw data is going into your processing unit, which is subconscious. It's below subconscious, actually. It's automatically processed in certain areas of your brain. There's like an idea of domain specificity, which says basically that certain areas of your brain process certain types of information. It's not the same for everybody. Like, for instance, a left-handed and a right-handed person may have two different sides of their brain that are working to do the same thing. Okay. And so that's really interesting stuff. But the basic idea is your brain is constantly taking this raw data and processing it. And only when it bubbles up, he described it like a wave turning into a tsunami or, a pot boiling over, right? It's only when it gets to the point where it's so prevalent in every, in the subconscious regions of your mind that it becomes consciously accessible. Okay. Which is crazy.
Well, it goes off of the idea that we don't think in words, we think in concepts.
I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. Yeah, I think I can't say for sure, but I think a lot of what we think of is through pictures and concepts, and we try to create mental models.
It feels like it, because when you think of something, it's like almost you get a wave sometimes of emotion to maybe a visual understanding in your mind, per se.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's.
The sensory, full sensory overload of maybe you smell something and you get
it just brings you back, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And that is such a powerful thing because your brain can start bubbling up that pervasive prefrontal cortex access,
Yeah.
but your brain is doing it sometimes seconds before you're even aware of it.
See, that's what I find fascinating.
Yeah.
How quick it is.
Right.
So for me, I remember, my mom, she's a nurse.
Okay.
And she would
hats off to your mom as a nurse. Yeah.
Hello,
absolutely.
Mom. In case you're on air, listening.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, she would always drive around with her medical supplies in her car.
Yeah.
And it smells like a hospital.
Oh, that's
so
great.
I would have sometimes, even when I'm walking down the street, I would sometimes get this whiff or like this smell. And then all of these memories, like, or driving in the car, just the smell of my mom is right there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so much fun. Yeah. It's like your mom will constantly and forever be attached to the smell of a hospital for you. Driving in the car for you will always bring back that memory.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of stuff going on there as far as like the frequency, right? The repetition.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you
Exactly.
have learned that association at such a deep level.
And someone could have another association to that smell that might obviously maybe not associated to their mother, but going to the hospital.
Yeah.
And that's not so comforting.
I think that's actually my association. I've spent way too much time in hospitals, sadly. And it's like, I know the smell.
Exactly. Like everyone has like some feeling towards that smell.
Right. For me, when I even just think of the smell of a hospital, I think of, I remember being in a gurney and just only seeing the roof for about 3 weeks after. For those of you who don't know, I have a broken back and I use a wheelchair. And so I spent, weeks after my injury sitting in the hospital, laying on my back. They couldn't sit me up. And so every time I think of hospitals or bring back one of those memories, it's like staring at the roof.
Yeah, not a good memory.
I mean, it's not bad, actually. It's just that it is what it is. I'm kind of against this idea of putting bad and good on our memories because, I've been exposed to this idea, at least, of that there is no such thing as a bad memory. And even the memories that we associate badly or we have, bad feelings connected to, we always have the ability to rewrite what those memories mean to us.
Well, yeah. They say every time you rethink of a memory, you change it a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been tons of
So you could change it. Yeah, you could change
it
it to be even more sad.
Right.
Or even more happy.
Yeah.
Exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. And we end up telling ourselves these narratives based on our memories, right?
Mm-hmm.
So say, let's take my looking at the roof in the hospital example, right? If I create a narrative in my head and then repeat it over and over that was a horrible time in my life and that there was a big problem and that it was so miserable, I'll start to think that is the only truth that could be possibly available, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see it that way. And therefore, that's not what the memory represents to me.
Well, that's quite beautiful.
It can be, yeah. It's really it could also be very detrimental, right? If you had a trauma in early life and you keep replaying it and becoming the victim every time you replay that trauma, you have just reinforced and given even more power
to that memory,
to that trauma, even though it's been gone for a long time.
Yeah.
And, it's easy to do. It's really easy. I think all of us have done, are currently doing, or in some way do that.
Yeah.
But I also think it's very possible when we think about these old memories and we think of them as bad, to also realize that we can think of them differently, and then they can become instructive and they can become a learning experience and they can be something that we can hold on to as a lesson instead of a pain.
I think that's a good way of thinking of memories.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also kind of like a mental game.
It absolutely is. But it's that whether we admit it or not. Yeah. Right? I mean, every memory we ever had is a mental game of how do we recall it? How do we associate it? Exactly. What is the meaning we give to it? Right? Yeah. And so if we change the rules of the game, we're still playing it, but we're a lot more intentional about it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might as well play it then.
Oh, we might as well play it. And I think with that, maybe we'll play this song.
This portion of the radio show was deleted due to copyright reasons, but you can tune in to KZSU 90.1 every Friday from 3 to 4.
Oh, that is such a good jam. I really love that one. So we are moving on with a conversation. I am the host of Modern Education, Benjamin S. Woodford. I've got my guest co-host in the studio today, Emily. You still with us, Emily?
Yes, still here.
All right. So we were just talking about the past and past traumas and different things. We haven't heard from any of the audience yet, so we will remind you the phone number is 855-723-9010. Go ahead and text us if you have a story or something that we're talking about speaks to you, or if you just want to say hi or, ask Emily a question while she's on the air.
Happy to answer.
Yeah, okay. So we would love to hear from you. Again, 855-723-9010. And you can text that in. Just please don't text while driving.
No texting and driving.
No texting and driving. There's a neurological reason why that's a bad idea. It takes about a third to a half a second for your brain to process what's going on and switch tasks. So as soon as you start texting, you literally reduce your reaction time
there we go.
to
We
a
got
dangerous
science
level.
to it.
Oh,
so don't do it.
There is science up in this room. Okay, yeah. So do not text while driving, but hand it over to your co-pilot and have them text your story into us at 855-723-9010. So we're moving on from thinking about past memories, and I think we're going to move to future. Now, this is something I've been thinking about lately, and, this is something maybe that is joked around a lot in movies and in, circles of people who want to achieve things, is like goal setting, right? Mm-hmm. So, people will write down a list of goals, or they'll do their New Year's resolutions.
Like short term, long term.
Sure. What's my 1 day goal, my 5-year goal, my 10-year goal?
Always happens in the beginning of the year and never do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this thing about, we want to set an expectation for where we're headed, and we want to maybe even have some control of our lives, right?
Well, it's definitely taking control.
Yeah, and it's funny because it feels like we have some control when we write down a list and put a date to it.
Oh, trust me, I have a lot of lists.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, so you like to be in control then.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate your honesty. Yeah. I think we all do, really. I read something recently that talked about our use of numbers is really just our feeble attempts to control the world. And we try to put numbers to things to reduce our anxiety.
Is it like a ranking?
Maybe. I mean, you could definitely use rankings as one example, right? I mean, for instance, we let people into Stanford and we rank everybody before they get here. And then we take just kind of the top 4% of that, however many people applied.
Yeah.
And that is essentially a ranking process. We've said, okay, we're only taking the top 4%, which means 96% of you can just go somewhere else. Good luck. But it really is, we feel that 4% is a good bet because we have numerically put some sort of restrictions on our uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And, some of those things may be totally valid. And I'm not trying to discount the value of numbers. I would never do that.
And how dare you?
I would never do that. But at the same time, it is sometimes our own little human feeble attempts to try to control the world and try to understand where the future will lead.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is done, I think,
all the time.
Yeah. I think a great example of this is baseball, because baseball has so many statistics, and it is just, it is a sea of frequently produced, highly correlated statistics, because you're watching maybe say one player. I'm not a baseball fan. This is more just something I was reading about in a science book.
Okay.
But
I don't watch too much baseball.
Yeah, I don't either. But they do have baseball games here on campus. So if you're interested in baseball games, feel free to go check out some of the Stanford games. I don't know how much they cost because I get in for free, but I think they're probably pretty great and reasonable compared to a pro game. I don't know.
Check it out.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to check it out, it's totally up to you. Where was I going with this? Okay, so lists, baseball, statistics. Yeah, basically just this idea that we can come up with so many predictive models in baseball for how a player is going to do next week or next month or next year or over their lifetime based on what we do know about them. But the reality is that that's still just such a horrible crapshoot.
Well, statistics are just putting you, I want to say, in a box of what's been predicted.
Right.
But humans are so unpredictable.
Yeah, that's true. And there's
so many external stimuli that are maybe something happened in his life. That's why he's playing bad today.
Yeah, exactly. And, maybe this one predicted to be star player had their mom die second year of their career. And now all of a sudden they have real emotional turmoil and trauma that is changing who they are as a person or the way they're experiencing.
Maybe they didn't do well on their exam.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, social and emotional cues that can really change our entire lives.
I'm thinking about so I used to swim when I was a lot younger, and my coach would always tell me it's mind over body.
Yeah.
Especially in sports. It's when I'd say anywhere.
I agree. Yeah.
But if you can get your mind to visualize what you're about to do and get yourself in a state of mind where you're calm and collected and that you're ready to do it, then your body just does the work, basically.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I've had moments where I was just like, how did I do so well? Or how did I do so bad? But you've been practicing the same amount of time, always doing the same. But if you think about it, of the actual time that you're in, it starts to make sense. Okay, so I was feeling a lot more sound positively. That's why I was able to do well. Or maybe, I wasn't doing well in school, or things at home were rough, per se.
Right.
And you get a completely different result.
Those things matter.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not some detached, completely siloed area.
So are
of your
those
life.
things put into baseball statistics?
I don't think it's possible. Or let's say we do not have the data collection capacity nor processing power to do that yet.
Yeah, maybe it's not a number.
Yeah. I know my professor in my marketing methods class this quarter, Christian Wheeler. I love him. He's great. If you're listening, I doubt he's listening, but if he's listening, you're going to maybe love or hate I'm going here with this. But he was claiming and believing that in class just the other day that if we had the ability to collect every single bit of every single thing that ever happened to anyone from the beginning of their lives to the end and process every single part of it, he thinks that the world is actually deterministic enough that we could predict about anything or everything that ever happens.
Really?
I don't agree with him at all, and I told him that, but I still think it is a worthwhile endeavor to be thinking about how you could go about doing that.
I'm trying to think how.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, this came up in a different class, I think, or maybe it was the same class. But you ever see Minority Report, the movie with it was with Tom Cruise, I think, and they basically predicted people were going to commit crimes before they ever did.
I remember a professor telling me about this movie.
Yeah. And so it's just this paradox of is someone responsible for something that they're predicted to do?
Well, that's kind of like the dystopian future.
Right.
Speaking of future.
Right.
If we get into such a controlled, monitored society.
Right.
Where we're saying we can predict, especially in policing, if we can predict crime before it was even committed, do you have the ethical standpoint to arrest someone or stop someone before they've even done it?
Yeah, I wish I could answer that question, but I think this is a good one for your philosophy degree to work through on your own time, right?
Hey, I've thought about it before, and I don't have any answers. So
well,
if anyone wants to give some.
I trust you'll come back and report to me when you do figure it out, because I know you will. You'll get there.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for the optimism.
That's what I do. This is modern education. We believe in people.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so we're thinking about future predictions. We're also we were talking a little bit about making lists and trying to secure our own control of our environment. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that you have control of your own life?
No. I'd say, even though I admitted that I do like to be in control, I think it's such a false mentality to be even going off of. Because let's say you're going to go meet up with your friend and you have an idea, for say, of how it's going to go. Yeah. And it goes completely different.
Right.
So it's you will always, at that point, you will only be disappointed by the fact that it didn't happen your way. Yeah. So I feel like having that mentality is almost more destructive than being well, I don't know what will happen in the future, but I guess that doesn't discredit goals. Because I feel like goals should always be there.
Yeah.
But not ones where it's fully controlling everything. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think of what you're saying as kind of goals are really great because they point us in a direction.
Exactly.
They help us, it's like having a rudder on a ship. You're still beholden to the waves and you're still beholden to the wind, but you still hold on to that rudder.
Yeah.
right? Because if you let go of the rudder, you're out of control.
Well, yeah. So you
But-
got to take hold of your life,
Yeah,
but also let the wind
right.
also take in you.
And just recognize that that wind is something out of your control, and so are the
Exactly.
waves and the weather and everything else.
It's kind of like the chaos theory, though. To
Yeah.
say everything is a bit chaotic.
yeah.
Is there order? I don't know.
Maybe no one ever really know, but we always, as humans, I think we try to put a structure and an order onto it.
Well, we do like structure.
We do.
We like to categorize.
Oh, we're
We like
good at
to.
that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Especially us academics.
right. I know. I mean, if there's a great example of this, and again, in one of the things I've been reading recently about bias, and it's this idea of, if I say to you, imagine an American lottery winner,
Mhm.
what comes to mind? What's the person that comes to mind?
Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, for most people, it is a grown adult male white person.
Yeah.
And that is our implicit association for most of us.
Yeah.
When you say American lottery winner.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you said American. Yeah.
Right. And, obviously that could be an 18-year-old girl that
Mhm.
won the lottery who is from Mexico but lives in America, and she is an American and just as rightly justified to have that title as
Yeah.
anybody else.
Yeah.
But
'Cause
it's
she bought that lottery ticket.
right. And everyone can buy a lottery
Exactly.
ticket. As long as you're over 18, I wouldn't suggest doing it. Actually, I wouldn't suggest doing it no matter what, but that's only because I understand the probability of winning is
You don't have a high probability.
Yeah. I think you're more likely to get hit by lightning while being bitten by a shark.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
is-
pretty good.
Yeah, so bet on that if you want to, but I personally would rather put it in a savings account or some sort of diversified index fund and let it grow.
You got better chances with that.
Yeah, you absolutely do. On average, maybe 8
But
to
come
10%
on,
a year.
you're killing hope.
Oh, I don't think
And
I
like
am.
the spirit of like maybe I'll get it this time.
You have seen the commercials clearly, because that is exactly what they are trying to get us to
Well,
believe.
exactly.
And it is like, hope is a powerful thing, right?
It is.
And feeling hopeless is also a really difficult thing to overcome.
Yeah.
And we're getting real serious here all
You
of a sudden.
keep getting
but
serious.
yeah, I'm fine with that. though.
Me too.
I like serious.
I like deep.
Yeah, absolutely. So, something I've been thinking about is, hope actually is a really powerful motivator. And maybe
It is.
in that respect, you just made this make sense for me.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody is hopeless in their life,
Mm-hmm.
and when somebody doesn't have the prospect of a good future or a powerful change and they're suffering, maybe the lottery is more valuable than anything that they could have held that dollar for. And
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't actually matter if they win,
Yeah.
because winning is not the point. It's having hope.
To have the hope.
Right.
Well, that's what kind of drives us, not even in the lottery,
Right.
just
Right.
every day
Yeah. I mean,
to have that hope.
yeah. I mean, if we feel hopeless, we give up real
Yep.
quick. I mean, I've seen, and there's always a learning curve as a teacher when you just
Mhm.
first start trying to figure out what you're doing. But I've seen students who, failed their first assignment and then got an F in the class for that first day,
Mm-hmm.
and they're ready to give up right away.
Well, yeah.
And it's like,
It's like that F is on your forehead.
yeah. And now you have to overcome the label.
Yeah.
And probably maybe more saliently, you have to overcome the loss of hope.
Yeah.
Because we always start the new year with hope and excitement, and we're like,
It's always
what?
nice to have that clean
Yeah,
slate.
yeah. And I tried to find ways to make it so you couldn't tank your grade until, the end of the first semester or even longer. And I know my advisor
That's
and
good.
many educators now try to not give a grade until the very end, if at all,
Mm-hmm.
because it really does create a label that has young people sort of
Can change.
in
Yeah.
a hole.
Change
Yeah.
the whole predicted,
Yeah.
how you feel and how you might do in your next test.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a powerful thing. So, I really appreciate you helping me see.
I'm happy to be here to.
I am so happy
Connect
too.
the dots.
Yeah, to understand, the power of hope is so much more than just a false hope. Even
Yeah.
if it's a false hope, even if it's
Well, it's back to what we were talking about. It's the mind game.
Yeah, exactly. The mind is a powerful thing.
It is.
Powerful to try to overcome it and powerful to try to stop. It's almost impossible to stop it when you set your mind to something.
You can go to either extremity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to play one more song and we'll come back with a little bit more chat and some station business. And we are here. I am Ben Woodford with Modern Education and Emily is in the studio.
Hello, hello.
And we will be back with you shortly.
This portion of the radio show was deleted due to copyright reasons, but you can tune in to KZSU 90.1 every Friday from 3 to 4.
I am the host of Modern Education, Benjamin S. Woodford. I have Emily in here as a wonderful and amazing and enjoyable co-host today.
Thank you.
What do you guys think out there in Radio Land? She did a great job, didn't she? I think if you were able to text in, especially if you're Emily's mom, you should definitely text in at 855-723-9010 and let us know
Mom.
what a wonderful job she did. I personally think she's a natural, and I hope to see her back in the studio more often.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah,
what an
absolutely.
experience.
Yeah, it's been quite a bit of fun, hasn't it?
It's a nice chat.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed just chatting.
I agree. It was a great time, and I hope you guys had a good time as well. I hope we brought you some value in this hour, got you some interesting topics to think about and some new ways.
Intellectual stimulus. Yeah. Stimulating the brain.
Exactly, because education is not something that just happens in a classroom. It happens every day. It happens everywhere we go. It shouldn't be boring. It should be fun. It should be exciting. It should be engaging. And hopefully you got that today. So we're going to play you out with a song. And up next is Scott Moulton with Party Time, throwing down the hardcore jams, house, jungle, everything that you could imagine that sounds like it's techno music. He is laying it down every week. So one of my favorite shows. Definitely tune in. Keep that dial locked at 90.1 KZSU Stanford. And we are out of here. Thanks again.
Thank you.